Now that it's summertime, I am busy every week in my kitchen canning whatever is ready out in the garden. This year we didn't plant a whole lot of things like red beets, radishes, lettuce, and stuff like that. We just did a lot of cucumbers, tomatoes, some corn, and potatoes and stuff like that. So the first thing that was ripe was the cucumbers, and we have put up a lot of cucumbers already this summer. My goal is usually not just to can enough to last through the winter until the next canning season, but to can enough that I might not have to can some next summer, and then I can usually focus on canning something else. Gideon built this can shelf for me after we had our canned stuff on open shelving in the house. And then once my son started walking, it didn't really work out to have the canned stuff on open shelves because it was just always falling on the tile and breaking. So we had to put everything into a cabinet with doors so that they can't be accessed as easily. But this cabinet, as you can see, is already full. So at this point, I started putting canned stuff underneath our bed. Since I usually can a lot of one thing at a time, I can put some into the can shelves and then kind of put the overflow underneath the beds. That way, if I need something, I can still go to the can shelf and grab it, and then once it's empty there, I can just pull things from under the beds and kind of replenish whatever is empty in the can shelves. Another thing that we are storing in our can shelves is water glassed eggs. I usually like to water glass as many eggs as I can in the summer. That way, once it's wintertime, I don't have to worry about buying eggs from the store, because if you've ever had farm fresh eggs, you'll know that the ones from the store just don't taste as good. At least that's my opinion. So throughout the winter, 2 years ago anyway, I water glassed a lot of eggs in the summer, and we had enough eggs until the next spring when the chickens started laying again. So that's kind of my goal usually in the summertime, but I'm not always able to do that because this summer I'm finding it very hard to find eggs that are clean enough to water glass and also in the quantity that I need them. So usually I get a few dozen at a time, and then we water glass the clean ones, and the ones that have a few spots and aren't clean enough to be water glassed, I just wash those, and then we store them in the fridge and use them for baking. And Susanna likes to pick out the smallest ones for her breakfast. Usually if we get eggs, we always find some that are, maybe a chicken that just started laying and the eggs are really tiny, so those are her favorite. This summer I got 1.5 bushels of peaches, and I didn't realize that if you don't get the tree ripened peaches, they don't peel very nicely at all. So I had a terrible time trying to peel these peaches. These ones I actually just peeled like apples because I couldn't figure out how else to get the peel off, but the next batch I did, I just blanched them, and that made the process a lot easier and a lot faster. So when I can peaches, I like to just can slices in a light syrup. I think last year I did a light syrup and I thought they were still way too sweet. So this year I'm doing extra light. So that ratio is 6 cups of water to 1 cup of sugar. This isn't quite enough sugar to keep the peaches from turning brown, So once they're on the can shelves for a while, they don't look as nice and yellow as they do now, but they still taste good and they don't turn completely brown as long as you do add a little bit of sugar. Usually when I'm canning something, I forget to write down the recipe and take notes of what I could do differently the next year. So I didn't remember from last time I canned peaches that you can't fill the jars too full because once the peaches start to get warm when they're being water bath canned, they expand. And so when I got these out of the canner, they were way too full and I lost a lot of the liquid due to siphoning. So the next batch I did, I only filled them about 3/4 full of peaches, and then I did add enough syrup to give me about an inch headspace, and I had a lot better luck with that. The jars are a lot fuller, and I didn't have hardly any siphoning. So from the 1.5 bushels of peaches that I canned, I got 35 quarts of slices, and then I also canned 12 pints of fruit mush. Fruit mush is something that I learned from my in-laws. It's basically just kind of like a pie filling almost, but you add less sugar and less thickener. And this is something that we like to eat with our yogurt. Usually when I make yogurt, I don't flavor it and then I can add in whatever I want later. And the fruit mush is a really good way to add a flavor to it and also a little bit of sweetness. I used 4 jars canning lids for these peaches and the fruit mush, and I was pretty impressed that I did not have any seal failures out of all the peaches that I canned, even with all the sugar and the siphoning that happened. So that's why I like the 4 jars lids better, because I can also reuse them because the seal is a lot thicker. And even when I reuse the lids, I really get a good seal rate with them. So for these peaches, I canned them for 10 minutes and then I let them sit in the canner for another 10 minutes. And that also really helped with the siphoning when they were able to sit in the canner and kind of cool down a little bit before I took them out. And whenever I'm canning, I usually fill up my counters and my table with dirty dishes in no time at all. That's the only downside to having a small kitchen. There's just not a lot of space to put dirty dishes and to do canning and stuff like that. But we usually make it work. I just have to wash dishes in between canning and make sure the counters and the table is cleared off before I start a canning project. We did get our trim put up finally in the house. My husband put up the trim around the windows first, and then later he was able to also do the trim around the doors. And that makes such a huge difference in the house, you know, how it looks. It's a lot more cozy and it just looks a lot more finished than it had before. So now that the trim is up, I want to paint the cabinets in the kitchen and also the doors. We got white doors, but didn't really have a great finish on them, so I find they stain really easily. And because they're not sealed, the dirt gets into the grooves of the door and it's really hard to get them clean. So I got some paint and I'm excited to get to painting all of the doors and just kind of giving everything a makeover. And then I also want to put up some blinds by the front of the house because we don't have AC, and if it gets really hot outside, like 90 some degrees, the sun shines into the windows and it gets really warm in the kitchen, especially if I'm canning. So if I could just shut the blinds and kind of keep the sunlight out, I think that would make a really big difference. I am slowly trying to bring my kefir grains back to life after they were over mineralized. I didn't realize that our well water had so many minerals in it. So with the well water I was using, and I was also using cane sugar, they ended up getting over mineralized, and so I started using white sugar and spring water that I get from the store, and that has made a really big difference. I'm finally able to get my second ferment to be carbonated, but for a while there I was waiting for, a week at a time with the first ferment. But instead of fermenting, the grains were just shrinking, and they went from, I had about 3 tablespoons of grains, and they went down to a little over 2. But now that I've started using bottled spring water and white sugar, the grains are doing a lot better, and I'm able to get a good second ferment that's nice and carbonated and fizzy. So for dinner, I wanted to make something quick and easy since I had been in the kitchen all day canning peaches. So I decided to make some stuffed zucchini boats. This was the first time that I had ever made these, and I was really surprised at how good they turned out. I didn't think they would really have that much flavor because, zucchini doesn't really have that much flavor, but I added a lot of basil, and then I also made some homemade marinara sauce, which was just a can of tomato sauce, and then I sauteed an onion and some garlic cloves in olive oil and let that simmer for about 20 to 30 minutes until it was nice and thick. And then I put that in the bottom of the zucchini boats and layered some sausage on top. I added more fresh basil to the top and topped everything with some cheese.